All right. Thank you, Josh. Hereby call to order this Annapolis Conservancy Board meeting on December 2nd. A little bit late. We're having some technical difficulties in case anybody's watching, but we appreciate you hanging in there with us. So we don't have minutes to review tonight from our last meeting because there's some change in the folks that are doing minutes, but we'll catch those up in January. So we don't have that on our agenda tonight. The first thing that we have is talking about the easement monitoring checklist and signups. And I'm going to pull up a document that, if this is okay, Linda, that Linda drafted for us. Thank you for doing that, Linda. All right, can you guys see that? Awesome. All right, oops, go there. Oh, here we go. Sorry, guys, I'm moving all my windows around, having a bit of a problem. There we go. Okay, so I don't know. I guess, Karen, if you haven't had a chance to look through this, I haven't.
Yeah, I read through it before the meeting. I think it's perfect. I thought it was great. Thanks so much for doing that, Linda.
Sure. Thanks for putting this example in here. I always know like that word encroachment isn't something that everyone is familiar with in this context. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, the only thing I was going to suggest, maybe if this works for you guys, is we could add some links in here to where folks could find these maps and the deed terms. Well, that's kind of funky. Well, yeah, and I can do that if you want. I can just add in like some little instructions underneath of it.
Yeah, I haven't yet quite navigated whatever our
funky
online thing is for storing and accessing documents.
Oh, that,
I know that I a while back offloaded, I think, a bunch of the existing easements just to access, but I haven't, if you could put the links.
That's a good point.
System.
No, maybe that's what we should do, Linda. I was thinking, so right now the maps and I think most of the easement terms are like on the public website, but it's a little bit funky to get to it. Like you have to, I don't know, it's a little bit funky where each of them are. So I always have to like write out instructions. So I'm wondering, maybe we should just do that, kind of save them into a folder on that shared Google Drive. And then they're always there in case something happens with the website, like we have a backup or something. So that's actually, I hadn't thought about that, Linda. I think that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and sometimes they move things around on the website too. So
that's then this gives us, yeah, like an extra spot. Okay. So add those maps and easement terms right to shared Google Drive. And yeah, Linda, I just haven't had a chance to move everything over to it. But did you try to open the folder and you couldn't even open it? Was that the problem?
I couldn't find the link. I recall someone sending it to say, okay, here it is, but I couldn't find where that was.
Okay, I can I can forward that email. It came from Racine, I think.
Okay.
But like I said, I don't think there's anything in it at the moment.
Like,
so.
Oh, I can't, but
it's okay.
I really did a search and I must have deleted it or something.
No problem. Yeah, that's easy enough to do. So yeah, I can forward that around again and try to get some stuff in there. Okay. Yeah, speaking of which, were you able to look at the easement sign up sheet?
I could see that, yeah, because that you included that Google Doc in your email. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good because that means you've got access at least to it. Yeah. We know that much. So that's good. Okay. All right, great. And yeah, Karen, did that work for you too? That link?
Yeah, I was able to open it. I haven't signed up yet, but I was able to open it and read it. So I can do that.
Oh, that's great. No. I'm glad everything's working. I just wanted to double check that. Yeah. So for the signups, I heard from Trudy and she is happy to kind of, I guess we sign up for what we want, take 3 or 4, and then she's happy to take the rest, which is really nice. So I would say, go ahead, go in there when you have a chance and sign up. And Linda, I see, it looks like you're about to talk, so I'll let you do that.
I was just going to say that I looked at it, but I am not really, I haven't done it before. I'm not familiar with those properties. So I would just prefer if other people had properties they typically monitor, I'll fill in the breach.
Yeah, and I think, remind me if this is not correct, but my memory from our last meeting, we talked about that a little bit, was you might have had an interest in going out to Kingsport and looking at that one, and Karen was thinking of going, and you guys talked about going together. Am I completely off base there? I could be.
No, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
No.
I'm still willing to do that.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say that, and I'm happy if you want to come when I go to do some too, Linda. We can do some together as well. So, yeah, I'm trying to think, especially like if any are kind of tricky for parking or something like that, we could always go together. Trying to think about that. So that's probably not a bad idea. So if you I'm trying to think. So if you wanted to, go ahead, Karen.
My schedule is pretty open, Linda. If you want to just send me an email and let me know what would be a good day for you, and we can try to arrange to go to Kingsport.
Okay.
Fine.
Will do.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest one. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that held up with the tornado that went kind of through that area.
Is that the one where there was the tree and they're actually out there clearing it up a little bit? The tree?
I think that's onto that property. I'm not.
But does it come out to Aristide?
The easement does not go all the way to Aristide.
The easement.
Okay.
But it just the trajectory through there looked like it might have clipped the edge of the easement, but we're not sure.
Yeah,
until we go
just
look
behind there. And there was a big stream restoration project that was done back there too. I think South River did that one.
They said that their project was not impacted.
Oh, good.
They told me.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, but it's a nice project back there. I haven't actually been back there since it was in progress, so I imagine it's doing pretty well. It probably looks pretty good by now. Okay, yeah. So if you guys want to sign up for 3 or 4, I'll let Tom know to do the same, and I will do that. And Linda, if you have particular ones you want to check out, I think there's a column in there that says something like "want a buddy," like a monitoring buddy. You can check that, and then Karen or I can go with you or something if there are particular ones you'd like to see.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I should just look at we have a map that shows all of these on one map. And so that might just sort of jog something, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Hawkins Cove might be good if you haven't been out there.
Okay.
Just because we talk about that, it's going to come up, I imagine, a bit in the future with the visioning work that you guys are doing, Jackie, at the city, you and Racine, and talk about the METs. And
how often are you doing these inspections, and are you required to do them with a certain amount of frequency?
So Linda can talk about that. So we try to do these once a year, but I would say it's like once every year and a half. Sometimes we get off, at least in the past couple of years. And part of that is we sort of switched the time frame when we did them. But is that ring true for you, Karen, with the history?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that requires us to do it. It's just my understanding from when I joined the board was that it was something that the board took on because nobody else would do it if we weren't doing it, and just to make sure, as part of us being responsible for managing the easements, just to make sure that was being done. And there were actually some that there are some that we monitor that are held, the easements actually held by the county, and we do it because nobody else would be. They're either in or adjacent to the city boundary, the city limits. So the board had, before I was on the board, had taken it upon themselves to also monitor those ones because the county wasn't monitoring them. So I think it was just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What time of year are you doing the inspections?
I don't know. It's been kind of all over the place. We haven't been consistent. I think we're trying to get to a place where we're more consistent about it. Okay. When I first joined the board, they were doing it in the late spring. But, and then there, it kind of evolved to like people were doing different ones whenever they had a chance. So it was all throughout the year.
Mm.
But it does seem to help if it's at least mostly leaf off, so that you can kind of see what's going on a little bit better.
Plus, you won't be attacked by
Mhm.
bugs and you won't get poison ivy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. So that's what I think we talked maybe a year ago or something about that. Trying to find the right time. So we are consistent and we can move to sort of a yearly process. And I think we
That would be
said,
good.
yeah, kind of in the winter. So I think what we decided was at like our November meeting, we would talk about it, get folks signed up. And then like in the, if you have time December and then into January, February timeframe, get them done. Does that sound right, Karen? Yeah. So that's what we have right now. Does that sound good to you, Jackie? Yeah, and Linda can speak probably better than I can for sure about, what you're supposed to do. It's generally good practice to monitor. Every year is great. At least once every 3 years, I think, is what you have to do if you're an accredited land trust. At least that was. I might be a bit outdated, but
I was thinking it'd be good if you did it consistently a certain time of year,
Mhm.
or at least do them all at each year at a certain time of the year.
Mhm.
And be able to include that in your report, that the findings.
Yeah,
I know that
absolutely.
It is Joanna. Hi.
I was
Hey,
gonna say
Tom.
some of
Yeah,
them may not.
Yeah, finally correct the code. Thank you.
Oh, good. Glad you're on. Thank you for sticking with it.
Now, some violations may occur more during better weather, when people want to use the
People are
easement.
wandering around.
Yeah, so for
But
the ones
that's
that are problematic, you may want to have an interim inspection. The fact that we're not doing them anyway every year, I know I'm adding another extra layer there, but at least if we did them once a year.
Yep. If I can chime in, I heard Karen mentioning about history. I think predating her just a smidge. What they tried to do as well as they were able to get a city bus or whatever to take everybody around, and the board as an entity went out and pretty much hit them all, and they were able to walk through and do it fairly well as far as getting things done. What that accomplished was familiarize new members of the board with what's out there and what they should look for. And then, what that doesn't necessarily have to be done annually, but I mean to, again, familiarize everybody with where the places are, what needs to be looked at. And again, I echo Karen as far as waiting until after the weather has turned and a lot of the leaves have gone, or early spring before it starts up, just to be able to come back and by able to putting that in front of the council in reporting back, say in the annual report, to be able to say, yep, okay, fine, we've actually done something, and here's something that does raise concern, or something that we would like to follow up on, or here's something we might be of help to. Anyway, 2 cents worth for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Tom that I think it was really useful when we used to do it all together, and it was a really great way to learn about where all the easements were and everything. The reason, but it just got too hard to get everybody together on one day. So that was sort of why we stopped doing it that way. But
no, you're right.
But I do think it was really valuable. So I like Tom's idea of maybe we could do that every once in a while, like every few years or something, as we get new members. Just because I do think that it really does help. And then also I was just going to mention that we did at one point also discuss as a board bringing in outside volunteers to help with the monitoring. So and Anna, at one point the Environmental Commission had expressed some interest in doing that as well, helping with that. But I don't know if we really need that right now. But I mean, the problem is that bringing in volunteers, and somebody has to be responsible for training them and probably going with them, and So it adds another complicating layer. It's not as helpful as it sounds immediate at first glance, because there are other things that have to go in hand with that. But anyway, just mentioning that as well.
Yeah. No, it's good to always like get the history out here. So yeah, I remember we talked about that in volunteers, and I kind of feel the same way you do, Karen. I think it probably would take just as much time, if not more, maybe to sort of train, and then I imagine that would change from year to year who it was, and finding the volunteers, and kind of having someone to stay on top of them to make sure that happens. Could be just sort of another added layer, but always open to certainly trying anything you guys want to try.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking for a natural tie-in, you've got Earth Day, coming on in the spring, and a whole lot of people, get motivated to, to do some movement. Plus, there are also, some outreach things that the Naval Academy does. So I think probably even somebody from their cross-country team that ends up running through most of our properties anyway, getting somebody to at least be responsible for open their eyes when they're going through. There may be volunteers in any of a number of areas if we ever decide to move in that area.
All right, so we'll try to keep doing every year, and we want to do it sort of in this kind of January, February timeframe, right? Sound good? When it's leaf off, can get out and get everything. And then every couple of years, maybe try to get everyone to go together, especially when we have no members. Do you all want to try to do that this year, or do you want to kind of do it separately again this time around? What's the feeling there?
I'm wondering if we should just go ahead and do the monitoring as we've already started planning, and then maybe when the weather's nicer in the spring, we could revisit if we want to just spend half a day just driving around to all of them, just to do a quick look and say, okay, here's where it is. And because then hopefully we'll have at least one more new board person by then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Does that work for you, Linda?
Mm-hmm.
As a new one? Okay.
Yep.
And Tom, that sounds good to you?
Yeah, Lord willing, creek don't rise. I'm a little immobile now, but yep, absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll check in again on that, Karen. I had sent a couple notes to see if the individual you had suggested, if that was kind of where that was in the process, and I hadn't heard back. So I'm happy to check in again and just keep poking that. Yeah. All right. That's good. Okay. So the next thing I had on here to talk about were the rules of procedure again for the Annapolis Conservancy Board. And my intent was to try to have something drafted. And I apologize, I have not had an opportunity to do that. It's just been a busy grant proposal season. Some of you all are in that same boat. But I think I did have a couple of questions for you that have come up recently related to what our procedure should be. And the one that I think is probably maybe most important for us to nail down and really think through is when there's an easement complaint. So what is the process we follow? Hang on one second. Sorry, guys. I'm going to close this door for a second. Okay. Okay, sorry guys, apologies for that. Just trying to move the dog before it becomes a problem. Where was I? Oh yes, so I think the one that has come up a couple of times that would be good to really like nail down is when we get an easement complaint. So when someone comes and says, I've noticed on this property, someone has put up a whatever, or there's been a lot of trash dumping or something. So what is that process that we follow? And then at what point does it switch from us sort of to the city? And when we've gotten through this before, that switch kind of happens when it moves into enforcement, and that's really the city's domain. And again, we're just a recommendatory body. So whenever a matter is brought to us and we kind of say, this is what we think should be done about it, we're making that recommendation to the city, and they sort of take it from there and decide whether or not to follow up with our recommendation. So that's one side of it. And the other side is, so I was trying to think through as a board, if there are going to be changes that happen within an easement. In the past, my memory has been that we've asked those people to sort of come in front of the board and propose what those changes are. For example, when we had the stream restoration project in Kingsport, we kind of asked folks, if you're going to do a major project like that, just, let us know, come on over, tell us what it's all about. We can provide comments or whatever and kind of go forward with it. So I guess two questions there. One, sort of want to get your thoughts on what are the steps we need to follow to handle a complaint when it comes in, and what do we do versus what does the city do? And then second, do we want to also have that as a kind of rule of procedure that if there's going to be any major change within an easement, we ask the ones making that change to just come before us and let us know?
Well, I definitely think the answer to that second question is yes.
Okay.
We want to know. Yeah. I think with like the stream restoration, they just didn't know they didn't realize.
Oh, yeah.
But
That happens.
but yeah, definitely if there's going to be activity within an easement, I think it should come before us. The first question about like what's city responsibility versus board responsibility for complaints, that's a harder one to answer. I don't know if Ashley's on, if she might have some perspective, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it also comes back to like what Tom has said in the past about that we can only, as a board, we make recommendations. We're not any kind of enforcement agency. So there's that to consider as well.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ashley.
So I think the most important thing is if you're going to hear the complaint, that you build a record, some sort of record that you can give to the city. As in, we heard from these people. Yeah. This is what they said. This is the documents they submitted. And then a cover page with your recommendation. I think you guys are fully empowered to receive the complaint. If you have rules for it, to have some sort of mini hearing on it, as long as you make it clear to the parties that your power is to make a recommendation, and then to do some sort of final recommendation report with packet to the city. But from a legal perspective, my concern is not so much how you do it, but that you do it the same way every time.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, because like you're not nobody's going to appeal from you. You don't have any judicial power, but at the same time, if you're going to roll it over to the city for enforcement, we just want to make sure that the city can say, well, the board,
this is the process.
This is the process. This is what was followed. This was what was submitted to us. And that's what we made the decision on. Because otherwise, then if you don't have a consistent procedure and you don't give like a set packet, then the city almost has to redo the whole effort in some ways. Like if they're just getting like a cover letter from you guys, but they don't know the process you went through and they didn't receive the stuff, then it's like, well, due diligence on them might make them have to redo parts of it, which we don't. I mean, in more serious cases, maybe, but generally, I think for most complaints, you guys can handle that and it doesn't need to be redone by the city. So those are I wouldn't necessarily make it very complicated. It can be very, simple steps as long as they're the same.
So I'm thinking my first question is, so one, if we had this on the website, so if someone found an easement, they wanted to share a complaint or concern they have, should that first step be that they sort of like write it up in some format and send it to a city staffer that then sends it to us, or should it come directly?
Yeah, they should submit it to Jackie or whoever your staff liaison is. at that given time. It's similar to, I think probably the easiest process that you guys could follow is the Ethics Commission has very clear steps for how they receive like a written one, how they deliberate, and then what they do with their findings kind of thing. They have a little bit more power than you guys, but it'd still be a good, set system because they actually can do enforcement. But
All right, so it would be submit to our liaison, and we could
always something in writing.
Something in writing. The
And
date.
I can get the details, with the date, and they have to sort of present some sort of, I don't know, reasoning, because unless you want to investigate every off the wall complaint, you might want because the Ethics Commission has some basic standards. Like they don't consider theoretical questions. So like, they're not going to be like, what would happen if somebody built this fence kind of thing. They want it more like somebody built a fence. Yes. So, and then they generally want some sort of factual basis of something that has happened. Because otherwise what happens, and this is in your discretion, I'm just telling you what ethics is, that you can get a lot of people coming in with theoretical questions about, and that can suck up a lot of time. So in the written complaint, you probably want something that has actually occurred, and they have photos, or they can provide factual statements or something that they truly believe there's a problem currently existing. So photos are always nice if they can, and in this day and age with everyone having cell phones with cameras.
Is there anything strange if they would be taking photos on a private property? You know what I mean? I don't want to encourage somebody to go like traipsing around in somebody's backyard or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, but technically, if it's a conservation easement, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, we know. I guess we probably need to put a disclaimer that says, police do not trespass on private land.
Right. Okay. Okay, so we'll go into the city in writing at that point.
I mean, you don't need photos, but we need some sort of
date. I saw this
statement that they signed that there's an existing violation or problem. Okay. And then it should be submitted to the staff liaison, who would then distribute it to all of you guys.
So then, go ahead.
I'm just trying to think through. So after it would get distributed to all of you guys, then you guys would have to decide if the board's going to take an investigative actions, if you're going to have a hearing, who's going to be at that hearing. Is it just going to be the person complaining, or if you are able to identify the person being complained against, are you inviting them? What do they get to submit? How long do they get to talk?
That's why it's kind of painful to do this, because it's nice to have that flexibility when.
Well, you can always flex, but I mean, I'm trying to think who else does this. I mean, there are a bunch of boards who do it. And it might be the easiest way is if we find any of the YouTube videos of, like, for instance, the liquor board. If you find an agenda that has violations, you could look and see how they handle it. I'm trying to think who else handles. So court wardens might handle some. I'm trying to think if you watch one of their proceedings just to see how they flow, maybe it would be easier than just dealing with the black and white.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, so one thing that's come up before is in some cases, all right, so I like your steps here, right? So submitted to the liaison in writing, they send it to our board, we decide if it makes sense for us to look at this, and if we need to look at it. And then I think the next step would be us to do a site visit, maybe, if that's appropriate.
I mean, the Ethics Commission, for example, doesn't always have a hearing. Sometimes they just do their own investigation based on documentation received, and they don't have a hearing. They don't have people come talk unless it raises to like a certain level.
Also, I mean, just with someone observing that there may be a violation, isn't it more like they're calling it to our attention?
Yeah.
But it's not like they have standing to So I'm not sure.
Well, then you have to
You would
decide whether
necessarily-
you just want to, like, for instance, the Ethics Commission generally just investigates it themselves. And then they do a written finding that they give back to the people. And then they have certain rules for, depending on what the written finding includes. Sometimes they also post it on the website. So they don't generally do like a full-blown hearing where you have both parties coming to present things and all that. They keep it much simpler. And if they do want to do questioning, they might do like, side questions for the people, but they don't do a whole formal hearing process generally, unless they find, I think the only time is if they find a violation, and this wouldn't apply to you, and they're going to take enforcement action, then the person getting the enforcement action against them has a right to have a hearing. But since you guys don't have any enforcement power, that really wouldn't apply. So you could keep it simple, as in you receive the complaint, you investigate it, maybe you reach out to any other interested parties you have, and then you sort of make a decision. But I will keep in mind that if you're going to make a recommendation, that would have to be at a formal meeting for a vote. And so at that time, you could maybe, instead of having a hearing, you could maybe have any interested parties come and talk for like 3 minutes and cap it at that. So it's not really a hearing. It's just, you're going to discuss the matter. It's an agenda item. You're going to do a vote on it, and you'll open it up to public comments, 3-minute maximum for everybody, or you allow people to submit comments.
I think that's probably is pretty good. If once we get a hold of it, we could do our investigation, which could be a site visit, and maybe reaching out to the owner or to, like you said, whoever may be engaged with that particular parcel. And then sort of as our, board I guess we decide if we decide that via email or how we have that conversation internally, if we move forward or not.
The problem is, if you're under the Open Meetings Act, if you have a majority of people talking sort of close together on email, it becomes a meeting. So you always have to be careful. So what I would suggest is, after you do the internal investigation, you put it on an agenda item and have like the lead investigator report back their findings and their recommendation for a votes and or additional questions from the group.
And vote if we want to have we won't call it a hearing, but if we want to
vote, if you want to make any sort of recommendation. So it'd be a vote is if you want to make any recommendations to the city, and I guess you could do a vote if you want to do a hearing, or you could just skip, not do hearings, and instead at that time, as part of the agenda item, allow
that's what
brief public commentary.
That's what I'm wondering, if that should always be an option for people, if when sort of that person who's investigated shares it at a public meeting, if we should allow an opportunity for.
But I would keep it really, you don't want to do like rebuttals and presentations. You want you can I would reach out, the person who's investigating, reach out to the person who submitted the complaint and the person who the complaint is against, and gather materials from them, gather written testimony from them, gather all of that stuff in advance, and then bring the whole pack. You could share the whole packet with the board in advance of your meeting, and that it's an agenda item on for, and then at the meeting where it's an agenda item, then you do the brief group discussion and recommendations moving forward, plus possible public comments. And just skip the whole hearing thing, because you guys aren't really set up to have a hearing. And then hearing also encourages, not that attorneys couldn't also submit it, but then you get like, well, the attorneys are going to present, and then are you going to have rebuttals?
This is more than
closing statements, and
I think. I mean, go ahead.
It just gets more complicated. Like my board of elections, I'm also working through this with them because they have the same issues. They get a lot of complaints, and how are they going to work through complaints? Well, now we have another 4 years to deal with it again, but
well, I think that from a practical standpoint, if we think through, okay, so we get a neighbor calling in, they say, well, there's a pile of trash that looks like it's on the property. And so someone on the board could document that they've investigated that, looked at maps, and then kind of come back and say to the board, that's not on this property. So because some of this is really a lot about legal interpretation. So do we have the ability just as board members looking at something and to kind of determine, oh, that's not a violation? Either it's not on this property, or we're looking at the easement terms and the easement terms doesn't restrict this thing they're complaining about.
That would be, yes, you have the power to make a recommendation. I wouldn't say you have the power to do a finding, but you have a recommendation that says after your investigation, you would recommend that there is no violation or that there is a problem out there that needs enforcement. Okay. And if you need legal assistance, I can always provide that. I will say though, that I prefer to provide that sort of legal assistance offline to the chair versus on the spot at a meeting.
Yeah, that's what we've
because
done.
when I provide it in a meeting, I have now breached attorney-client privilege because I have shared it with whoever is watching us.
Yeah.
So I don't mind doing like legal advice, like in this context, publicly and live, but for like serious matters, I would prefer to do that offline.
Right. If there's any question by the board member that's sort of investigating it, then they could reach out to you to say, do you have thoughts on this? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we can email it back, or I can that can be part of the package depending on how you want to present it. But I'm always leery of giving true legal advice in a public forum in case it needs to be used in a different way. So, but yeah, I would try to keep it fairly simple, fairly easy, that you guys it could mostly be handled by like one or two people, and the whole board does not have to be enmeshed in the matter till it becomes like an agenda item.
That's what I'm trying to avoid too, because sometimes, like Linda said, most of the things that come up are something like that, right? There's a bag of trash, or there's something small, which in that case could just be, the recommendation would be, we just want to let the property owner know and see if it gets fixed in like 3 months. And if it's not fixed, then then we figure out what to do next. But that can be like, that's not, I don't feel like we need to have people coming to a meeting for that. And
I think you could write it so that public comment on the matter can be reserved at the discretion of the chair or the board. Because Open Meetings Act doesn't require that we take comments.
Okay.
Can't there be like tiers of infractions? I mean, like, minor things go through this one process, and more major
as long
things.
as it's consistent. But I mean, public commentary is always, I hate to say it because the public doesn't like to hear this, but technically it's not legally required. So we're not legally required to allow time for public commentary. And even if we receive it, we don't necessarily have to respond to it on the spot or at all. Now we always do, because we're, public servants and you guys are volunteers. So public commentary is useful, but you want to make sure it doesn't get to a point where the public commentary is completely overriding anything else you're trying to do. Which is why I always say, set a time limit. You can set tiers for it. As to which ones you think you need to get public. And you can always, I'm not saying not get comments from the interested parties on the side, but you don't necessarily, if it's a minor trash issue, you don't necessarily want like 50 people speaking on it at a meeting.
No, I don't think we need that. Yeah.
You know, so you just, you want public input. You definitely want public input, but you don't want it to an extent that you get lost in the weeds with it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes I also, whoever owns the property may not live there. They may not even be aware that somebody else threw something on their property or somebody else has done something,
right.
And so I think always, I don't know.
Yeah. But I think we've had some more complex ones of late, but most of them, should be fairly simple. So you could have a fairly
Yeah.
simple procedure for them.
Yeah, I think this is pretty good. I think.
Yeah, and then I guess you could always have a caveat for when lawyers and or private litigation is involved with matters.
We do. Yeah.
Which could be as simple as, matter is referred to the Office of Law for further consideration and recommendations. I mean, it could be that simple, but if hopefully most of them won't involve lawyers or private litigation, but when they do, we don't want you guys entangling yourself in something where you could sort of expose yourself to being subpoenaed,
Appreciated. Yeah.
extra liabilities, things of that nature. So
does that sound good to you guys, Karen, Linda, and Tom, that if in a situation someone wants to bring a lawyer into it, or the matter is already somehow entangled in private litigation, that automatically is something we direct to the city of law? Or is there a situation where if somebody wants to have a lawyer represent them, we would allow that at our board meeting?
This time, I think a recommendation that you're going to have, if they want to, to bring an attorney in, I would suggest we bring city council in as well. To help listen to, to that, just to make sure that all the verbiage is going in the right direction. And I mean, that quickly gets beyond our purview. I mean, our purview doesn't necessarily get into the knockdown, drag out, hi, we've got to resolve this. I mean, shoot, the city has taken decades to, resolve simple issues. So I think probably bringing a number of issues, to a more critical area, not necessarily, again, surface area, but more critical issue would, we give it to them and just let them run with it. Hopefully the majority of anything that we would see would be either a disgruntled neighbor against another disgruntled neighbor, and we try to work within the homeowners association to see whether they can put on the striped referee shirt and see what they can do to resolve their own homeowner situation. But as long as the city is not, the things that are under our purview are not jeopardized or are kept within the scope of what our challenge and responsibility is, I think, we might want to be conservative on the thought processes on that. And if it does get elevated, then again, bring the city attorney in on it.
Yeah, just because, and I've seen this happen because I handle the Maryland Public Information Act requests, is that because everything you do is public, if you discuss the matter and it somehow helps or hinders in private litigation, then they can subpoena you or request all of our records to get rolled in as evidence in that private litigation. So you can embroil yourself in the matter without meaning to.
I think, and Ashley, so in the past when this has occurred, once the issue that's been, someone has asked us to look at an issue that's already in litigation, we have automatically said, you'll have to work directly with the city office of law because it's currently in litigation. And so at that point, because it's ultimately the city's decision, they need to decide whether or not they want to, like you're saying, actually kind of entangle themselves in any way. So that's how we've handled that in the past. If there's an ongoing active litigation related to the matter, is we've kind of said at that point, you need to go directly to the city office of law. We don't handle things once things are in private litigation.
I think that we can handle presentation, like when Mr. Hartman first came to us about the carries.
That was before it was in litigation, I think.
Yeah, right before. They wanted their lawyer to explain the situation. That's fine. The board can listen to the explanation. They can ask questions, but should not make any, should not debate amongst one another or make any recommendations or say one way or the other what they think. It's kind of like when you go before HPC, there's a presentation made, they ask questions, and then they, separately do their own deliberations. and write their decision. So that way we don't get into anything, getting subpoenaed later.
So would you suggest doing that? So I guess here's a question for you, probably Ashley, and well, Jackie, I know you're a lawyer too, sorry. For any lawyer in the room would be if the situation is currently not in litigation, but there is a lawyer there and it does go to litigation, if we say something in that room prior to it moving to litigation, can that sort of entangle us? It's a terrible way to describe that.
I'm saying don't comment. And Ashley, I think that's what Ashley
Right.
said.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even when you do presentations, we can also always do, if you know you're getting an issue that's coming up that you think is going to be complicated or complex, you can reserve on your agenda to do a closed session.
Yep.
Sure.
That was my other
You
thought.
don't always have to go into closed session. You can say, we had a closed session on the agenda, but we're not going to use it tonight. But
right. Just
you
put
can
it
put
on
it on.
there.
If you're going to have one, you have to put it in advance, but you can put it on there to seek legal advice. And since Jackie is an attorney or I'm an attorney, you can do it so that you can listen to their presentation. You could ask your questions. And then if the board still wants to discuss it, you could go into closed session to discuss it.
Okay. So when private litigation is involved, that's automatically going to the city's Office of Law. When it's not in litigation, but they want a lawyer to be present to explain or whatever it is, then yeah, we just listen to it, we ask questions, and then if we want to debate or ask questions of our lawyers, we go to a closed session. And we'll just need to make sure that our members are very clear that's how that works.
And you said it earlier, Joanna, anytime someone brings a lawyer to any meeting, make sure Ashley or someone from the office
absolutely.
I mean, every single time I have someone say, like I have a meeting next week and the construction company wants their lawyer to be there. I'm like, okay, then our lawyer will be there too. So it's just good to have, check all the boxes.
Okay. And Linda, it looked like you had something to say there a minute ago. I want to make sure I wasn't cutting you off.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Karen, Tom, any thoughts from you guys?
No, I'm good on that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I think we got our process pretty well worked out here. And what I'll do is I've just sort of been typing some notes. I will share these back out with you guys and see if there's any edits we want to make or if there's any remaining questions that pop up. But this has been really helpful. And I really appreciate Ashley and Jackie, you guys being here to, talk us through what other boards are doing and things we need to be thinking about.
Joanne, so who's going to draft this up?
If you want to, have at it. But I was gonna, or if anybody wants to, I should not automatically say I'll do it. But I was just sort of typing as we were talking here. So I'm happy to do that and just send it out to you guys for
happy
review.
To do cleanup. If you do like just sort of a rough outline, I can sort of smooth it out.
Okay. I'm just asking because I'm taking notes for you guys. I'm doing minutes for you. So.
Oh yeah.
I want to make sure I get this right. Okay. Joanne did the draft and Ashley can review it.
Yeah. And then I think the other procedures we talked about including in this rules of procedures document, a little bit more straightforward. It's like the monitoring, trying to think what the other ones were. I had a list of them, but it's not quite as, you know what I'm saying. We probably don't need to be as thorough with some of those. I think a question I had for you, Jackie, is if there is an instance in which the city wants to do, I don't know if the right term here is enforcement, but if they feel they need to do something on the property, like if the city feels there needs to be a fence, or if the city feels they need to plant something, if the city feels they need to do something on the easement in order to protect the easement value, which is allowed in some of these easement deed terms, as we're finding out, should that come before us at all, or should the Conservancy Board be given an opportunity to review that before the city moves forward with that particular, I'm not sure if you would call it an enforcement action.
You're asking if someone on the outside comes forward and says that the easement, or where's this request to do something coming from?
Well, in the current situation, there could be a planting plan that comes forward where the city would need to plant trees on a particular easement to prevent people from going on the easement. In that case, that ultimately is the city's call if they want to say, yes, we're going to plant these trees on the east property or not. Should there be a step? Should we write that in the rules of procedure? What happens in that case when they are going to take an enforcement action that has that kind of a step? Does that need to come before us? Do we need to see it? Is it just let us know? Just wanted to get people's take on that.
Well, it's not an enforcement action. That's just,
Yeah,
the case you're talking
prevention.
about is a recommendation to that, well, we know where it's coming from. It's coming from self-interest, but that someone's recommending that they're willing to plant on an easement property at their own expense. And it's a matter of whether the city will allow that or not.
It's not their property though.
It's not their property. And
So the city has to say, yes, we are going to, I don't know what the right term is.
allow
here,
that. It's not an enforcement action. I mean, they think they are couching it in terms of to prevent encroachments upon this easement property and the terms of the easement.
It's like a donation.
Yeah, it's
essentially,
like
is
a
what it
donation
is.
in a way. And I think that, you guys as a board, you are looking, you're tasked with looking at the integrity of the easements and making sure that their purpose is being served. And this might be an easy one for you guys. Might say like, yes, we think that our recommendation is that there should be trees planted on this property, will prevent people from parking on it and doing other things that aren't allowed. Or you might say, we don't think so. Obviously it helps the city's canopy plan. It's one way I look at it, but that's my program and my self-interest on that one. You guys might look at it and say, we think this would enhance the conservation easement on this property. We do think it will protect the easement. We're recommending to the city that this be allowed. I mean, that could be your recommendation.
So what do we call this, like as a procedure? What is this? I'm thinking of the Stagon document we have to, we're on the hook to create.
And so it's not the actual the owner of the property coming forward to offer?
No, this is, so the situation is that a homeowners association owns a piece of property that has an easement on it or deed restrictions that the city is enforcing. Somebody feels some of those easement terms are being violated, and to prevent that from happening, they're interested in having the city use their power to put up trees or something else on that east property, which is allowed in the easement terms. So the city can, I guess, make the owner have trees.
It would be a city action. At the end of the day,
yeah,
it's a city action.
Just trying to decide what we need to include here.
I would say, that if you become aware of it, I would do my best, and I'm thinking Jackie would probably do the same, that if these matters arise, we'd probably bring them to your attention.
Okay.
I think you're always within
I'll
your
just
rights
keep it out
to make a recommendation for it. But I don't know if you need a specific
all right procedure
on it.
I mean,
I'm happy to keep it out.
Recommendations that are made, suggestions that are made with respect to an easement. Let's say somebody in the community is really concerned about what's going on at a particular property, and they are suggesting that some additional measures be taken to protect an easement. I mean, they can bring that to the Conservancy Board's attention, and you guys should consider it and make recommendations, say, we don't think there's any problem here, or we do agree this might help protect it. You can make your recommendations to the city, and the city can take action to do it.
Yeah. Maybe just a general procedure on how you do your recommendation.
Yeah.
As in, like, it becomes an agenda item, you vote on it, you write it up, and who you submit it to, kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's a whole category. There's a whole slew of things that could happen that aren't infractions.
Right.
Yeah.
All the time, like most things that we review are things that people want to do to an easement that aren't an infraction. They want to do something to it. And then we review whether we think it's okay for them to do that thing. And, it can be a variety of stuff. So, it could be, like you give the example of planting. We've also had requests to put fencing in easements. So,
right.
that's like it's like a whole nother category of like people wanting to do things to or in easements that we would need to review.
Or
Yeah,
to allow a
the
gate
owner-
to
like
be
the owner of
open,
the
right, Karen?
property,
What?
wanting to exercise a reserved right coming forward.
I said, and also to allow a gate to remain open. That was another Kingsport one.
Oh, yeah.
It's a funky one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And say what you just said again, Linda.
Well, I was, I'm not familiar with sort of all of our easements, but the standard thing would be the owner of the property coming forward to the easement holder if they're set up in the easement, a request permission to exercise a reserved right to do something, or just a simple inquiry to say, hey, I want to do this, but it's not clear to me that it's allowed under the easement. Do you feel it is?
Yeah, I think that's in the past, usually that's generally what happens. Like the property owner wants to do something and or an adjacent neighbor, and they go to the city because the city holds the easement, and they ask the city, and then the city bounces it to us.
Right. Okay.
So like another example I'm just thinking of is one time we had neighbors who were concerned about trees that had fallen in an easement next to their house, and they didn't know if it was a problem or not, and they asked the city whether the trees that fell over should be removed, and then the city asked us whether they should be removed. So that's another example. And in the end, we said, no, it's not a problem. Like, it's a natural area, just leave them. But that's another, example of something that could come up where we would be asked to give an opinion.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think this is
the city taking an action on an eased area. We might have other instances. I guess in this case, it's sort of a reforestation, but where some of our easements actually allow the city as easement holder to remove invasive plants. So do we have some easements that actually allow the easement holder to take some actions beyond just monitoring and enforcement of the easement? Is that correct?
Yeah,
at
least one of them does. I know.
Okay.
I haven't looked. That hasn't come up in others, but we should look and see. But yeah, we do have that in one. Yeah. So
I think the standard. I mean, they're all a lot of them are different because a lot of them were kind of put in individually before there was a standard deed of easement that the city was using, but the city's standard deed of easement, as far as I'm aware, is pretty loose about what the city is allowed to do, because at the time the city was very concerned about wanting to have full access to reach utility lines if they needed to, and there was a utility line in the easement under the easement. So they're not real strict, some of them, but I'm maybe getting off topic here.
Well, I mean, this is another thing that we've talked about before is wanting to do, and this is my memory again, which could be off. I think, Linda, you were potentially interested in looking into this, was creating or looking at the easement terms that we have and maybe trying to suggest or like a template for Annapolis Conservancy Board easements or something, or knowing that things are going to come in and out, right? Like public access is not going to be on anything to,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was observing that the easements that we have generally look like they've come from as part of a development approval process. And but that there was the ability and interest all along, we're open to accepting donated easements from landowners outside of the development process. And those usually look different than the ones that the development easements the city owns.
And that would, yeah, and that's where that probably makes most sense, like you're saying, is that's where it makes the most sense for us to have our hoped for terms. Yeah, but these are, it's interesting. I don't know, always learn something different when we have one of these things come up about our easement deed terms and the history of it. But I think this is pretty good. We've got a pretty good process here. I think what I'm kind of hearing is really we need a procedure that is, if you have a complaint, if you have a question about an easement, what's allowed or what could be allowed, or anything like that, the process is generally put it in writing, get it to the city, they'll get it to us. We'll have one or two people investigate it, then we'll have it at a board meeting. And if we need to have people there to give their comments on both sides, we'll do that. And then we'll set aside a closed meeting session in case we need it behind it. I think it'll make more sense hopefully when it's in writing, but, and you guys can edit it. Does that sound pretty good so far, at least?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm good with it
Okay.
from a legal standpoint.
Yeah. Well, that's important. All right. So any other thoughts or questions about that? Feeling good. The next thing, I just put it on here to remind myself really to ask you guys. So we have to give our annual reports in. I want to say, I think it's January 15th is the date that those go in. I think our board meeting is the 13th. So I was going to ask if one of you all would be interested in helping to draft the annual report this year. We have a template we sort of adjusted every year. And generally what that takes is just sort of going back through the meeting minutes of our meetings and sort of figuring out what it was we did or didn't do and making sure that gets in there. Trudy has offered to draft it if we can send her the points, things that we did or accomplished this year. So I was going to see if any of you guys would be willing to sort of take a look through and suggest what are the main points we should have in that report.
Fortunately, I really can't take it on this year, but
Oh, are you asking for volunteers on the board to do that?
No, I was, sorry.
Okay.
I can be more direct.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Basically,
Okay.
that's looking through the meeting minutes
Mm-hmm.
and calling out action items.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if you want to just send it to Trudy and she can write it up. Does that work?
Yes, let me write this down.
thanks, Linda.
Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. Okay. All right. Send to Trudy. All right. And I think it's the same timeline when we have to tell them, well, I don't think it really matters, but what we usually do is in January, we do our chair and vice chair elections. So if you are interested, don't hesitate to jump on board. It's a good train. Anybody is welcome if they want to be the chair or vice chair. So just putting that out there. We have to do that every year, and we'll do that at our January board meeting. So if you're feeling enthusiastic, go for it. My feelings will not be hurt whatsoever. So please jump on in. All right, with that, I just want to check in on some updates. So new board members, I reached out, I'll reach out again to see if we have one moving through the process. We think we do, but I don't know where it stands. The Hawkins Cove visioning effort. So Jackie, I was going to check in with you on that. If you have anything you wanted to share. Oh, and you're muted. Sorry.
Okay, so the RFP has not gone out yet. Public Works had to do some additional assessments. There's an outfall there. And the outfall is an integral part of the existing retaining bulkhead. So it supplies some of the support system for that bulkhead. So once the bulkhead is removed and vice versa, they're kind of supporting one another. When the bulkhead comes out, they're gonna have to do something when they build a living shoreline to properly support the outfall. So the outfall may be a bit more expensive than they anticipated, and Public Works is looking at that, to how they're incorporating that to the RFP, and whoever is selected will have to design around that and design for it. So it's going to be a more expensive project than originally anticipated. So we originally received $65,000 from the trust. A gentleman by the name of Patrick Denker, who lives in that area and is a member of the Spa Creek Conservancy, has very generously donated $50,000 from his family foundation, the Denker Foundation, to the Chesapeake Bay Trust to then route to us. And so we have to do a little amendment to our grant in order to receive that money. So it's almost double the amount. However, unfortunately, because of this outfall issue, we think it's going to gobble up a lot of money. I was hopeful that we could have done more at Hawkins Cove with some of the other amenities, the trail improvements, boardwalk across some of the wetlands, maybe adding to the benches and picnic tables and trying to start building that bike path and historical marker that, Karen so generously provided for the grant. However, so we'll see how far that will go. And when we put out the RFP, how much people can do for the money that we have. But that's the good news. We almost have double the amount.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Denker said that there could be $50,000 that comes to us for this project every year. So if we have to put some things on the back burner, those things, are a reality. They could be a reality. Now, also, I warned Mike Johnson that the parameters of that site, we may need to do a boundary survey there. I don't know if we have all the relevant information about who owns what parcels and what the true boundaries are. So the office of law to help us with some of this, and we'll have to go outside, or the office of law might use a contractor. And we may have to, spend some money. However, pursuant to the memo that we worked out with the Critical Area Commission last year or the year before, we can use critical area fee and lieu money for boundary surveys now. So this will be one of the first instances when we do that. So there's money for us to do that there.
Exciting.
It does not have to be used by the grant, monies. We can do it outside of that grant funding. And I know that Mr. Denker is he did not have any stipulations on his gift. But he did say he would like to see a kayak rack put there. I think we can accommodate him with that. And since we wanted to have a kayak launch, it makes sense. He would also like to see at least 10 kayaks donated to that kayak rack and be for the use of children in the Hakka communities. There's some, we talked with the trust about that. They were amenable to it. There's some issues about, making sure that children are supervised. When they use them, we may be able to get SUP to participate or some other organizations. Kayaking groups were supportive and provided letters in support of the project. So they may be groups that will volunteer time and volunteers to train the children and supervise them properly. Could also be a program through Rec and Parks. So that's the only stipulation, thing he would like to see. It wasn't even a stipulation. And he mentioned also dredging in that area so that more watercraft can access the area and it can be more conducive to kayaking because it's a mud flat most of the time.
That's what I was about to say. You can get out if you're willing to muck through it.
Yeah.
But I kayak up there and
I do think that with the work that the living shoreline will require, that the living shoreline will extend out quite a bit.
That's what I was wondering.
That'll get you beyond some of the worst parts of the mud flat, but I don't know if all of it will. So the county holds the DNR money for dredging. They're supposed to dredge in the city as well. And that's something I told Mike Johnson, the director of public works, we need to put together our priority list with Hawkins Cove at the top, especially since we already have funding for it, and start working directly with Anne Arundel County Public Works to make sure that we get some of that dredging money that they get every year.
Yeah, that's going to be tough because DNR decides how they allocate the dredging money based on how many commercial and like recreational vehicles, or not vehicles, but boats use that waterway. And so it's such a small cove that that's going to be hard to sell.
However, Karen, they do look at historical use, and that was historically used by watermen and the American community watermen, especially.
Yeah.
And we're trying to make it into a public water access, public water launching area.
Yeah, we could do that.
It checks some other boxes, and I think Beth Bellis has already done some bathymetric, soundings there and measurements and gathered data for it
Oh, cool.
already. And that was one thing when I first inquired about this, probably 3 years ago, in general about dredging in Annapolis, to the director of public works in the county. And he said, oh, it takes like 3 years because you got to get all this data. Well, I think we already have the data. So I think we can make an argument for it.
Sounds promising.
The mayor is really pushing for dredging in Hawkins Cove. We're trying to make it happen.
Great.
Gotcha.
By the way, when you were talking about the having like some organization to help with the children and the kayaking, I know Debbie Woods from Chesapeake Children's Museum, that's been her dream, is to do that at Hawkins Cove. So you should definitely reach out to her, because that's like, she's been talking about that for a decade or more.
Okay,
that's great.
So yeah, she might be a good resource.
So my other question to you, Jackie, was so related to one of the things this board has been talking about, which is potentially looking at putting in an easement on this property, maybe working with MET to do that. The step we were waiting for was to see what sort of the vision was for the property and what the plan is. And so I was wondering, have you guys created like the official vision for Hawkins Cove, or is that still in process where you've said, these are the elements we want to add to Hawkins Cove that the community has agreed on? And so this is our plan.
Yeah, there was a conceptual design submitted
for the whole property.
Let's see if you guys need it. Maybe I need to send that to you.
But I think because the last time we talked, it sounded like you were gonna, use like the feedback that you've gotten to say, these are the elements we will and won't include, right? Like you wouldn't do, I don't know which ones you've decided on, but like basketball court versus more green stuff.
So
and at that point, we'd go to MET and say, these are the things that would be on this property. So they could say whether or not, yes, this is an easement they would be, comfortable holding.
So before we submitted the grant proposal, we did the outreach, and that's
right.
That fed the design. And then after we got the grant, we did subsequent public outreach. Didn't change. Really didn't change. So the design that was submitted is, what we're planning. Remove the bulkhead, put the line in, improve the dock, put a boat launch, a paddleboard kayak launch there. Try to use the money if we have enough to tie into the RSC system that Spot Creek put in. And they did a couple of little bioretention areas near the water, but they aren't really tied to the water very well. That was like a secondary project for them. And then, signage was another thing that was brought up, whether we will have money now with $50,000 to do some signage about the living shoreline and the RSC, what that function is. And then if there's any historical signage, we might be like 2 signs we put up. Then we include still within that RFP. It just depends on how much money it's going to take to do the living shoreline, the bulk of the work, or it might be second phase would be improvements to the trails, a boardwalk over the wetlands, part of the trail improvement, building some steps on the steep slopes. So, and it's been also icy and treacherous. And then connectivity with a biking trail, for that 4-mile loop. So those might be future, they're all in that proposal, and they're all part of the plan still, because we just got consistent feedback over and over.
That's great. Would you, and I don't know what's easiest, if it's the design or if it's the proposal itself, or if you have it sort of written as a separate
I still have it in a Word document. I have the grant in a Word document.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to get is, I think would be helpful to you is when the RFP is finally written up. I think that would be the most helpful thing to you. I've been pushing Mike Johnson on getting that done.
Would that have all the elements that possibly would happen on that property?
I believe so. I think I'll have to check with Mike to see.
Because that's what we would need to show.
He's going to put the dream list together and then have them what they can do.
Yeah. If you've got all the elements that you're ever going to want to put on that property, that's the point at which we would move to MET, because we don't want to go to them and start working through an easement and then have somebody say, oh, wait a minute, we want to put in something else. And then that changes, right? So that was my recollection of that conversation with them, was you guys figure out whatever it is long-term you want to do for that property. And at that point, we can come back together and see, is this something we want to do together or not?
So in the easement, once we do that, I think it's going to include the easement would include all the things that the elements of the plan and whether the plan might have to be phased. And that would allow us, like, even if it all doesn't go in at once.
Oh yeah,
That's included in the easement, we can do
that's
it.
okay. Yeah, I would hate to have us to move forward with this and then somewhere late in the game, the city or whoever says we want to put something in, and then it's like that doesn't fly with the, or God forbid it happens and then you guys want to make a change to it. That's not what we want to do.
But,
So
yeah, I
whenever
think
you guys are ready, we
I
can
think the
move
easement's
forward.
really important, as we discussed, because what prime property that is,
Yeah, I know I'm like chomping at the bit to do it, but I also definitely want to make sure it's when you guys are ready and you've got your vision set.
And it should be designated as a park, which it's not right now. It's not one of the city parks.
Okay, cool.
That's great that it looks like you need a survey, so that'll be great for the easement.
Yeah, that'll
Looks
take
like-
us that step
Yeah.
closer.
I
Dual
see that
purpose.
anyway. Yeah.
Yep. So this
Is there
is
any opportunity to use the recreational program open space money for doing like the boardwalk over the wetlands or any trail improvements? Like the Rec and Parks gets a little bit of program open space money just for recreational
Yeah.
use, not for
I
land
think that they're
acquisition.
limited to doing that in parks, and it's not a park yet.
oh,
They need to
that-
get it designated as a
That might
park.
be a tricky thing.
that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And there's, we can get it designated as a park, well, before this project even starts, or anything, that just needs to be designated as a park.
And maybe that
Okay.
would be a way to get the gain at a park
moving.
happen quicker.
Yeah.
Because then we could get some money for doing stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
There's a
always
num-
nice, isn't
There's
it?
a number of street end parks too, parks that are not parks, that really should be parks. And it's making improvements on them and people are using them, but there's a lot of residents that tend to treat them
Yeah.
as their private
Yeah.
happy hour spot. And some people don't want them to become parks, and because I want
Oh
them
yeah, that's
signs to say they're parks. Everybody
no, it's
knows
a big
parks.
thing.
Yeah. So,
So that's
there might be a bunch we can submit all at once.
This could
Well,
also
and I'm sure that Department of Rec and Parks has like plans for that money for other things, probably. I don't know, but if they, if they didn't have plans and we could use it for stuff
Yeah.
in Hawkins Cove, that'd be
Yeah.
cool.
Well, I'm meeting with Archie next week, and so I'll bring this up with him.
are you, since you're meeting with him next week, have you all talked at all about the easement for Truxton Park?
No. we
Okay.
don't. Yeah.
And again,
I know
if
Archie's
you-
supportive of that too, because he was
Okay.
in his park. Yeah.
if he has questions about that, I know he knows the woman that we've been working with at MET very well. They've worked together for a long time. And so she had recently called to just check in to see where things stood and
What's her
said,
name?
Ann Carlson.
Okay.
And
Oh,
she said she would be more than happy to just answer any kind of questions, right? Like what happens when you do this or that. So
Okay.
she sort of put that out there. I know they've worked with each other for a long time. Yeah, this is all really exciting. It's moving. We got some movement. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, I was going to let you know, not that anybody wants to do any grant proposal writing, but there's one that the Chesapeake Bay Trust puts out called Green Streets, Green Jobs, Green Towns, a G3 grant. And that'll be coming out. The RFP goes out in March. This might be a good fit for that. I haven't written one of these myself, but anyway.
the Hawkins Cove grant is a G3 grant.
Oh, well, never mind. You know what you're doing. Yeah. So I was just going to say, you probably don't want to go back to back then until you get the one finished, but I was just trying to think of other ones that might have a little bit of funding for you.
Well, the plan is to apply for further funding every year.
That's
Once
great.
once we get the design part done, construction's done, to go back, you need a better chance, of course, once you have a project and you want to enhance it. So
Yeah.
that's the plan.
This is exciting. And that's,
$50,000.
I was going to say,
That's pretty
it's
heavy.
huge. And that's so generous and wonderful that somebody's wanting to do that. So that's great. All right. So let's see other updates. So we talked about the MET easements, MOU with the county. I know Ashley has checked in on that. I think that's still just sort of in process. I don't know if you heard anything else related to that, Ashley. That is an MOU on how to use the program open space monies that are allocated to the city, but that are held by the county.
I have not. It probably needs a push from like one set of Rec and Park people, or maybe Jackie over to theirs. Because what I'm hearing back from their attorneys is that's where it's percolating, is in the Rec and Parks department.
Are you okay to handle that, Jackie?
Yes. It's on the list.
I mean,
Sorry.
I don't
I
mind
know.
keep nudging the lawyer side, but the lawyer side just says that
Yeah.
it's sitting in the department.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. I'll bounce it back to you, Ashley.
Okay. Thanks for continuing to look into that, you guys. Right. Well, that's all I have for you guys. Do you all have anything else you wanted to bring up or share? Any questions?
If you'll indulge me, I just have one really minor thing. Jade Baldwin was chair of this board for many, many years, and I was chair after him. And when he passed away, his wife gave me a whole bunch, like she gave me a couple boxes full of documents related to this board's work that have been in their basement. And so they've been in my basement. And I'm just wondering if, I'm just throwing this out there, and it doesn't have to be resolved tonight, but just to get it out of my brain and give it some life. Like if maybe somebody would be willing to take those boxes and go through them and see if things should be scanned and put into the Google Drive for the board, or what.
I can do it. I can't promise it'll get done quickly, but I do look stuff
Ashley,
like that
way
all
to
the
step
time.
up.
Oh, that would be
So,
awesome.
I mean,
Did it
I
remind
did
you
like
of Gary?
over this past summer, I did like 20 boxes of our stuff. So
Oh, this is not anywhere near that much. It's
You
like
have a whole team
2 or
of
3 at the
elves or
most.
something.
I know.
yeah, it was
Scary
just it was a brief lull during the August recess, and I took advantage of it because the boxes had been sitting in my office for a while.
Oh, you
Tired
needed
of looking
more
at
room.
Or wasn't there litigation once and then it turned out all the information were in boxes in Gary's basement?
Yes,
Gosh.
yes, that I think
Not ideal.
before Gary left, I tried to pry as much as I could out of his hands that I knew what to do with, at any rate. But yeah, I've been slowly compiling and scanning lots of the transactional legal documents and stuff. So I wouldn't mind taking a look at them. If you can get them to me in my office at City Hall, I'll take it from there.
That is fantastic.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Of
don't be a
course.
Gary.
Don't be
What's that?
Don't be a Gary.
Oh, yeah.
lesson
It'll be
for
a
the
noun, being a Gary.
day. Oh, that's great. Thank you guys. That's it. Yeah, that's interesting, Karen. But there's some interesting stuff from it. You guys have, when does that date back to?
Oh, the 80s, I think.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's
That's
like
good to get, though.
a mishmash of things. There's like some, there may be some old Conservancy board brochures in there, and there's a lot of like meeting minutes from the here or there, or
Yeah.
different notes about easements. So I don't know. I haven't really gone through it very closely. So
That'd be cool. Let me find some-
I'm a pretty fast skimmer, so
I bet.
I generally can skim and do a discard, relook at pile pretty fast. So
well, thank you.
Awesome.
it'll be a nice break. I've got 2 Public Information Act requests that are about 5,000 emails a piece, so it'll be a breather from that.
Wow, that's crazy.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
for the minutes, purpose of the minutes,
Yeah.
who's on the phone? I can't see. There's no name, 443.
Tom
Okay, it's Tom.
Lippert. Yeah. And Trudy has an excused absence. She's out on vacation. She wrote to me.
No, Trudy. Okay, Karen,
Thank you. And thank you, Jackie, for doing that. That's awesome.
sure.
Really appreciate it.
And Linda.
All right. Well, with that, I guess could I have a motion to close the meeting?
I moved to close the meeting.
Oh, you guys weren't ready yet. Yeah, I just want to keep going.
I'll second.
That's Linda first and Karen second. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope you have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everyone.
Don't we have to say all in
holiday
favor?
season. Oh, shoot.
Oh,
I always
yeah.
forget that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi, I'm with you.
Thank you, Tom. I was going to poke on you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, guys. Hope you have a really good holiday season. And I look forward to seeing you all in January.
Take care.
Yeah. All
Thanks.
right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.